This week's Likkutei Sichos will do a review in Chelek Chop Aleph in the Parshas Boy. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Boy. If you're following the order of the project Likkutei Sichos, we're coming almost finishing these five Chalokim that we were learning. Um, Chelek Chof Aleph, Chof Beis, Chof Gimel, Chof Daled, and then we'll move on to the Hemshech in the next series of Sichos. In any event, and this parsha discusses about uh, the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. And the Rebbe's discussion in the Sicha is about that by Kiddush HaChodesh we require two evidence. We have testimony of witnesses for knowing when the new moon is, and we also have the calculations. And the Rebbe explains b'pnimis shenyonim, why is it by Kiddush HaChodesh that we need both. The Rebbe also goes through in the beginning about the special requirements for Kiddush HaChodesh, the witnesses, that according to one opinion, Reb Shimon, they would allow for relatives who you normally cannot testify together, but by Kiddush HaChodesh it would be different. And the Rebbe discusses why is it different. And we discuss what are witnesses. Are witnesses a verification only? They tell us, they prove to us what it is, or it's halacha that we have to listen to the witnesses regardless. It's not, as we're going to go through all the details, we'll go step by step. First, the Rebbe brings down the machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanon, whether relatives would be permitted as an exception to testify for Kiddush HaChodesh, that they saw the moon together, which normally relatives are not permitted. Aleph. B'negei Eidus HaChodesh is do aplukta, as it relates to the testimony for the Chodesh, the seeing of the new moon. There is a disagreement between Tzvishin Rav Shimon and Rabbanon, between Rav Shimon and Rabbanon. Rav Shimon's view is as Av ubenoi v'chol hakrevim, that a father and a son, those are relatives, all relatives, kshedim le'edus hachedesh, would be fit or kosher to testify for the month. If a father and a son or any other relatives come and testify together, they're two witnesses that they saw the moon, the Moed Halavana, we would accept it. What's the basis for that? Where is the exception? So he says, "Balishtate in Posik," because the Posik says, "Vayoyim and Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron." Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, who were brothers, relatives, he says to them, "Achodesh hazel lochem." So what does it mean, "Achodesh hazel lochem"? Teaches Reb Shimon. That means you can be mechadesh the chodesh, Moshe and Aaron relatives. Was made. Edus zu tehei kisheira b'chem. This testimony should be kosher through you, Moshe and Aaron, which were brothers. The Rabbanon's view is, they hold, as keredim seine apostle edus hachodesh, that relatives are unfit or disqualified to testify, even for the chodesh. The Pasuk says Achodesh, that means something else according to the Rabbanon. And their Pasuk meant as Eidus Zu Tehei Mesura Lochem, that this testimony is given over to you, which means as a Bezdin is Mekabel the Eidus Umekabel Chodesh. It is a Bezdin that receives the testimony, and they are the ones that Mekadosh the Chodesh. HaChodesh Elochem means you're responsible, the Beis Din, to make the Kiddush HaChodesh, but not the testimony. This is not talking about being the witnesses for Kiddush HaChodesh. That's the Rabbanon's view. So this is a disagreement how to touch the posik between Rabbi Shimon says that the posik is telling us that brothers are qualified to testify for a chodesh, and the Rabbanon say no, that this posik is talking about that it's based in who has to receive the witnesses and be mekadosh the chodesh. But why is it take that edus hachodesh is different than all other edus? Normally, all over edus that are relatives are not permitted, are not allowed to testify. We don't accept relatives. How come they would be accepted over here? So the Rebbe Maharash explains that the testimony over here by Kiddush HaChodesh is not just that we rely on the witnesses, because we also have an accounting. We know, according to the calculation, when the moon will appear. And if the testifies, for example, on a day we know that it's not possible for them to have seen the moon, we won't accept them. So it means we don't just rely on their testimony. In this case, and also Bisman Hazeh, we don't even have a Beis Din to be Mekadosh the Chodesh. So we also still are Mekadosh the Chodesh. We still have the Yom Tovim, the month, everything goes on because we rely on the accounting, the calculations. But because of that, the testimony of the witnesses comes is just as an extra, and that's why the Rebbe Marash explains that relatives, according to Reb Shimon, would be okay. It's Rabbi the Rebbe Maharash, the Tam from Reb Shimon. So the Rebbe Marash explains the reason of Reb Shimon. As Eidus HaChedesh is anders from Kol Eidus, that the testimony for the month is different than all other testimonies. Bound as Apilo on the Eidus, since even without the witnesses, Beis Din knows according to the calculation when sees Rosh Chodesh, when Rosh Chodesh is, and that's what Derech Visi is by uns, similar to the way it's by us. As Achshav she'ein mekachin al pi hariyah. Now, when we don't do the kiddush, the sanctification of the new month by seeing, is on the Shemchun al Cheshbon. We rely on the calculation. That's how we make Rosh Chodesh today. Kumtois. So it turns out, explains the Rebbe Maharash, as the Eidus is nita zach was bil odom lo yehoyu yoidim klal. This testimony is not something that without the witnesses we wouldn't know at all. The Riber is an krevim ksherim leiduzu. Therefore, also relatives are kosher for this testimony. It's not such a strong testimony as in other cases where we don't know without them. In this case, we know without these witnesses. It's only because we have the calculations. So we have additional witnesses. So therefore, in a case where these witnesses are just additional, over there it's sufficient, even you have relatives. So you can have Moshe V'Adin testifying there. That's why Kreid Markosh for these witnesses. But the Rebbe asks, but the disqualification of relatives is not because we worry maybe they're lying. It's not a logical disqualification. This is an inherent Torah decree that brothers or relatives are not permitted to testify. So what difference does it make that based in knows without them? It's not about verification. It's an inherent psul. Why is it that in this case they would be acceptable? Okay, we would know without them, but we still need witnesses because we don't rely on the cheshbon when we have the witnesses. So why? How come over here the witnesses are okay to be relatives? Darf verstehen. So we need to understand the psul von kroivim. The disqualification of relative is doch nit mitzad achshash shema yishakru. It's not because we worry maybe they lie. Nor Gezeres Melachu. That's a decree of the king. This is the Lashon of the Gemara and the Rambam. That Eberster says that, you can have the most trustworthy, Moshe and Aaron, the most trustworthy brothers cannot testify in any testimony, even though we know they're not lying, because it's not about lying. The Torah just says that they cannot be accepted. It's Exeris Melech. Izman nishtana durch them was Bezdin Veisapia Cheshbon. So why is it different? Bezdin Taken knows according to the Cheshbon when the melody is the Emiskait from Zeir Edis, they knows that it's true what they're saying, but it's not about truth. It's not the disqualification is a disqualification from the Torah Gzeres Melech. Uh, so the Rebbe is going to make the point now that because the whole witness over here is not the full witness, because as the Rebbe Marash explains, uh, because uh, we don't need that extra strength really of witnesses in our case, because we already know that we have a Kiddush HaChodesh, so it comes out the Kiddush HaChodesh doesn't need that force of Edus. It's all we know already. So when we don't need the force, the special quality of Edus, we're going to be okay with brothers. Let's look inside. Yes, never have beer, but in that can say the beer and then the explanation is Edus is nit nor abir. Edus is not just verification to find out. Apisechel, saying logically to find out, because we don't know what the case is. So we want to have witnesses for the case. Nors is a din, but this is a law. Asiyas Gemar Dover. And they make complete the matter. This is a law that the witnesses make up what with their testimony. Al pishnayim edim yokum dover. The two witnesses, they make up the thing. They're not just telling us about it, but they establish. The Torah says that they make up, and this matter, that is what witnesses are. With the Rambam is mevayer, as the Rambam explains, as nitztavinu lachteches adin al pishneidim kisherim. We have been commanded to decide the law based on two kosher edim. The Torah says we believe them. Even though it's possible that they testified falsely, the Torah says you have to follow them. That's the rule of the Torah. It's Exeris HaKosa. The Rambam says that we trust the two witnesses. We have to go by the two witnesses, notwithstanding. It's not about because we're sure that two witnesses are saying the truth. Two witnesses can be lying too. The Torah says, but we trust two witnesses. That's the law of the Torah. Two witnesses are the ones that make up, not only do they tell us, because they don't necessarily tell us 100% either, but they establish that this is the case. The Torah says we have to listen to them. Und dieselbe Sache is im zweiten Gzeh. The same thing is true on the other extreme. Das, was krevim seinen Posula Edus, the reason why witnesses are not fit for testimony is the witnesses on one hand, on one extreme, they actually establish. And why aren't relatives allowed are disqualified for testimonies can now, as we said before, afilu when is nitokech shash as a meshakir. Even there's no worry that they're going to lie. It's still not going to be acceptable, the testimony, because just like witnesses establish something because the Torah has given them the power that they can uh, finish, and that they make the halacha. The Torah has also said that Kroivim cannot tell us halacha. Afilu when in the Tokich Shash is not the live ben Zebel Meshakar side. But the Toike von Edus, because the force of witnesses is nit nor mitzad dem birur sichli was mahadruk zeh. It's not just the verification, the logical, the finding out was mahadruk zeh that you get by witnesses. Oh, so now we know what happened. No, we need witnesses to establish. They can't establish. But this gets for the Torah says these are the ones that establish. The Torah did not give that power to relatives. So basically, witness testimony is not a logical. Testimony is something the Torah has given witnesses. So it goes in both extremes. The Torah has given them, even when logically you may not agree, they may be lying, and still Torah says believe them. And on the other hand, even if we know for sure that they're saying the truth, but because the Torah has not given the din of Edom, acceptance of Edom, if they're relatives. So this is not something which has to fit that we know that is true or not. So we see basically what are Edom. Edom are a Torah, a din, a gzeres hakosu, what the Torah says. And that's why relatives are no good in this case. Bald over as, so now that explains. Bald over as to live koveya zayin chodesh. Since to set up the month is niet muchrich der teke von edus. To set up the month, we don't have to have the force of edus. We don't need that Torah edus over here. The proof is genug the birush al pi hacheshbon. It is suffices, it's sufficient to figure out according to the cheshbon. Because the far kenal achshov she'en mekatsh napiri. That's why for the chodesh we don't really need testimony. Today, for example, quote from before, that now that we don't do kiddush by seeing of the moon, we don't have this process on a shem kenal cheshbon. We rely on the cheshbon. So we see that for Eidus HaChodesh, we don't need witnesses. For Eidus HaChodesh, accounting, the calculation is sufficient. The Riber, therefore, is Oich by Eidus HaChodesh. So therefore, by the testimony, we do have a testimony. Foder sich ledas Reb Shimon. So therefore, according to Reb Shimon, blois der birush al yidei ha'edus. We only need to sort out to verification. We don't need the force of edus, which usually would disqualify brother. But in this case, we don't need because we rely on the cheshbon. So we don't need the full edus. We just need the verification that is done through the edus. In afal when says nitoket chashash from shema yishaker. So therefore, in a place where there is no worry that maybe they will lie, that there's no benefit. I mean, sometimes relatives can be trying to help each other or against each other. But this is talking about the Kiddush HaChodesh. This is just seems to be something that not Negeya. Seinen euch krevim kasherim le'edus. So therefore, here relatives are kosher for witnesses. This whole witness requirement is a lesser requirement than we have normally for edus, which is a din edus. Over here, it's only to verification. So therefore, relatives in which we don't have to worry about that they may have some sort of interest and they gave a davar, in the Ha'ara, the Rebbe has a whole discussion. What happens if it would be a case where negim davar, whether that still they would be okay, as the Rebbe brings down from the Meches Chinuch in the Ha'ara, the whole discussion over here. The Rebbe explains what the Rebbe Marash means. But the bottom line is the Rebbe is explaining the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash said that over here it's only birur because we know without the Eidim. So, but the Rebbe asked, but okay, but still Eidim are not believed even if we know they're saying the truth. So why would they be believed over here? But the Rebbe explained it's the pshat over here that by Eidos HaChodesh to begin with, we don't need the full weight of Eidos. Normally, Eidos, they make up, this is Hadin, Halacha, they make up the testimony. So relatives can't make up the testimony. They're puzzled for that. But in our case, we are just using the Eidos to verify because we know without them. So it's just a bitter Eidim. And for bitter Eidim, relatives are okay because they don't have any self-interest. And the Rebbe brings out in the space another interesting answer, interesting idea that this concept that here it's only the level of birur, that this is what is doing over here, that it's sorting out, would also answer another question. The question is, why are we even saying that Moshe and Aaron should not be able to testify after Matan Torah or Yidden or Gerim? And a ger is like a child. They don't have a relative. They're not relatives anymore. So Moshe and Aaron after Matan Torah were not relatives. And not relatives should be able to testify because they're not really related. So what's the Rav Shimon's raya that Moshe and Aaron, they're testifying even though they were relatives? But since the Rebbe explained that the testimony of here is just birur, is just to sort out. So normally relatives, when it comes just to birur, should also be a problem, even if they're not really brothers, because the feelings are still there, even when there is necessary for the establishment of the din Torah. So then you can say that two relatives, which are regular witnesses, but they were Gerim, so they're not really related. But when it is only a birur, over there it's negaya the feeling, and whether they're really brothers, there would still be a disqualification. Let's look inside. The Rebbe will explain this. Base. According to this explanation that here it's only birur, the witnesses is just birur, this will answer an additional question. Was man can frag on the das Reb Shimon, that one can ask according to the opinion of Reb Shimon. The din is, the halacha is, as geirim ein lohem kurva, that converts don't have any more relationship, that they were related before, after they convert, don't have relation, are not related anymore. Afilu shnei achim shenizgairu, even two brothers that have converted by idim zelazeh, they can testify one for the other, even though it's a relative. The ger shenizgair ki kotten shenoi ledomi. A convert that converted is like a child that was born. It's a new person. is beim tim tzoloi as b'yitzis Mitzrayim. So if you will say, find to say, which is the Gemara, Yevamos, different places that at that point the Yidden were considered like a convert and they were like they were born. As we sees Mitzrayim, or we didn't get a din from Gadim, that when they left Mitzrayim, they had got and they became converts. So then it's not understood. Vos is the raya from them, vos eduzut bachem. What's the proof? The fact that the Eibishter says that you can testify, Moshe and Aaron, the two brothers, was from Gehata din from Gadim, they had a law of Gadim, so they can testify for each other because they're no longer relatives. So how do we learn? How does Rav Shimon learn that Krevim can testify together? Moshe and Aaron weren't really Krevim. But based on the above, we can, however, say those was Gadim ein lahem kurva and meidim zelazem. The fact that Gadim are not considered related, and they can testify one to another is mitzadem was psul kurva is adin v'gzeres hakosuf. Is because the disqualification, the relative, the Torah is a din exeris hakosuf, and the Torah says that relatives are not to testify. It's not because they may they're close, they like each other, they're mind, they care for each other. That's not the reason. The reason is Xeris HaKosim. So therefore, about Gedim Hoben Nit Kain Din Korme, and since Gedim don't have the law because they're converted, so they're not related. It's not a natural, it's not a logical, it's a custom that relatives can't testify to each other. But Gadim are not relatives because they're not considered relative. So then there's need the cloud and psul. That's why they're not part of the disqualification. So that's why Gadim are allowed to testify because it's a halachic that brothers or relatives can't testify for each other or against each other. But in a case where they're Gadim, they're not considered brothers. Mashenkim, and that's on Edus versus Bloizabir, but as opposed, if the whole testimony is just verification, it's not a din. It's just bidur, shapi seichel, it's illogical. Is there chisoren from krevim in them sugedes? So what would be the problem with witnesses when it's a logical, it's not a Torah testimony, it's not a witness that the Torah, it's something we need verification. Is the chesorim from Krev dem sugedes mitzadem kituv hadas v'sidov hakrev. Over there, the disqualification would not be inherent halachic disqualification, would be because of logical, that there is by relatives. Umibal das the kituv hadas zwischen achim is do oich ba'achim shenizgayru. And since that level of care, kituv hadas, that they care of each other, would be even applicable by brothers that are converted. We see in actuality, the fact that they converted doesn't change their feelings to each other. We see realistically that they still remain close to each other. There's kituv hadas. So when the testimony is just kituv hadas, so kemen upland from them was Moshe v'Aaron and kshedim la'edus zu. The fact that we allow Moshe and Aaron, who were Even though they were gating, they're kosher for this edus evdi achrei matan Torah craving. We can learn for those after matan Torah, their relatives, that in this testimony that they could, even though since it's a birur, since it's just for verification, and there is a closeness over there, and since the Torah allowed that closeness uh, for brothers, the Torah allowed it to Moshe and Aaron, they had that closeness, and yet it was acceptable. Says Reb Shimon that Krevim today, even though they have that closeness, and still they can testify for each other. So the Rebbe explains uh, another part, the idea that Moshe and Aaron weren't really relatives, but the Rebbe says that Moshe and Aaron, not being relatives, but they were still had that kiruv even though they were gated. And so, in a place where the psul of the edus is gzeres hakosu, the Torah says we need the testimony. It's not just a logical; it's a Torah edus, so to speak. As we're saying, the Torah says we believe the edim are the ones that establish, regardless of logical or not. So then the disqualification of Kravim would only be when they're really Kravim, but Gerim are not Kravim. So therefore, Moshe and Aaron's testimony would not be a proof for uh, today for Kravim, Gerim, that they should be okay because they weren't really relatives. But since the Rebbe established that the whole testimony of witnesses for the Chodesh is a logical witness. That's the whole, because the we don't need really the Adam. It's just sometimes we rely just on the logic. So the whole part of the Adam is a logical uh, verification. When it's a logical verification, the disqualification of relatives is not just because the Torah says disqualified. It's a disqualification because there is something which they're related. So if there was that disqualification, then Krevim, and they're still a love, even though they're Gadim. So Moshe and Aaron still the Torah allows them. That should tell us that Krevim now should be allowed to testify because they're Moshe and Aaron will like each other, so they should be able to testify today too. Uh, that's how we would. That's how we would learn, and that's why we say that Krevim today uh, are allowed to testify, even though because the whole testimony is a logical, and when it comes to a logical uh, testimony, then relatives should be okay. And we could learn from Moshe and Aaron because even though that technically, halachically, they weren't brothers, but still they had that feeling. And since they were okay, that's okay for us as well. That's how Reb Shimon learns. Okay, so regardless, we have now uh, a machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanon. According to Reb Shimon, witnesses, relatives are permitted for Kiddush HaChodesh. According to the Rabbanon, they're not permitted. The Rebbe Maharash explained the reason for the Reb Shimon's view, and he explains that the Kiddush HaChodesh, and the Rebbe articulated, the Rebbe Maharash said the Kiddush HaChodesh is not a it's a logical testimony. It doesn't have the regular force, Gzeres HaKosuv of witnesses, and that's why it's okay. But the bottom line, the Rebbe is going to explain halacha is like the Rabbanon. So what's the idea? Why do we say that it's we need a regular din of Eidos here when this is only a logical testimony, it's only a bitter, only a logical. So why do the Chachamim not accept that? over here. So the Rebbe will explain, because since the Torah at the end of the day did not rely solely on this calculation, and the Torah still requires edus, it means that the Torah wants this to be a testimony. Yes, we couldn't know it without the edus. But why does the Torah want the edus? It means that the Torah wants there to be two things, and therefore, according to the Chacham, this has to be the full edus, not just bitter. This also is the toikif of edus, as everywhere else, and therefore relatives are not good. Gimel, the halacha over bleibt vidas rabbanon. The halacha, however, remains as the opinion of the rabbanon, as kroivim zayin pasul edus hachodesh, that relative are unfit for edus hachodesh. Und der Fun is verstandig. So from this we understand, as euch by Kiddush HaChodesh, that also when we talk about Kiddush HaChodesh, darf man haben dem Din Edus, also the law of Edus is required. V'yesh levayrus svarosam, so we can explain what's their idea. From them Gufa was Torah angesagt, the fact alone that Torah instructed, as es muzayin ederiya, that there needs to be witnesses to see it, and they have to testify about it, that they saw the moon. Because the Song said, you see this and be Mekadosh. So the Torah does tell us that we need witnesses for it. The L'chayre, about as based in Muz Saivi Oiserech and the Zman from Meilad Halvon Alpi Acheshman, since based in anyways needs to calculate the time when the Levona renewed one according to the Cheshbon. Unochmer is not only this Bezin required to calculate, but Bezin relies also on that calculation. Even when they are Mekadesh based on the seeing, Bezin will still rely on the Cheshbon, because if it doesn't fit the Cheshbon, Bezin will not be Mekadesh. Ben Yodu the Cheshbon. If they know, according to the calculation, that it cannot be seen, and then witnesses come and testify that they were seen, we won't rely on what they say. So why do we need? So why did the Torah say that they should actually see the moon, and we need witnesses for that? Is the fun gedrungen? So from this we can derive, as Torah will moisid sein auf an inyan hacheshbon, that Torah wishes to add on the idea of this cheshbon over here, which means not rely just on cheshbon. And the far learn the Rabbana, that's why the Rabbana learn, as Torah will zugeben, that Torah wants to add, as the Kviyas von Rosh Chodesh soll sein, nicht nur api cheshbon, was is bitter. The Torah wants that the Rosh Chodesh should be set, not just according to cheshbon, which is bitter. That's why the Torah wants also witnesses. Nor es soll euch haben dem Töke von dem Din Edus. It should also have that force of the halacha of Edus. But al pishnayim Eidim Yokum Dover, that the Snayim Eidim Yokum Dover, the Torah wants it to be. That's why the Torah added and said, Kozere, you need Eidim over there. The Torah doesn't want to rely just on base. So while we relied on the Cheshbon, and the Cheshbon will actually dictate whether we're going to accept the testimony, yet the Torah wants the law of wants the halacha was the din. Okay, so the Rebbe explains that by Kiddush HaChodesh we see the opinion of the Rabbanon is that, and the halacha, that krevim are not allowed, because even though there is verification by the Beis Din, and Beis Din trusts its verification and according to the calculations, but the Torah still wanted that there should be witness. Why did the Torah need witnesses altogether? It means the Torah wants a din. So therefore, we have to have it fitting the halacha, the din, And in a din, where we need din, Edim, that our relatives are possible. And therefore, the Chachamim hold that it's a psul edus like everywhere else. And the Torah says the Moshe Aaron is that they should bring it to best. But the question is, on the other hand, so how come, since at the end of the day we have witnesses, and witnesses usually establish the fact, and we said before it's a din, it has nothing to do with the reality. The Torah says even if we know that it's not true, doesn't matter. The Torah said we have to listen to two witnesses. So why is Kiddush HaChodesh different? That the two witnesses are not sufficient as, and we also are going to go by what we know. And if it doesn't fit what we know, we're not going to accept the witnesses, as the Rebbe will continue to explain in the Hemshech HaDvarim. Also, damit wird man euch verstehen, der Medrash im Posik. Sorry, one ahead of ourselves. According to this, it's not so smooth. On the other hand, since we are saying that you need the two witnesses, why don't we rely on them fully as in all other cases? About me is Mekadish, Apiharia, Kushnedim Kisherim, since you are sanctifying the moon by the vision of two kosher witnesses, which always we know by two, the matter is established. Is Bamenish Tana der Inyan von Rosh Chodesh. So why is Rosh Chodesh different? Was man verlässt sich nicht auf die Edus v'chakiras v'drishus allein, that you don't rely on the testimony, on the witnesses, and the investigation, and the drishus, which is their normal requirement for Edom. So why don't we rely on it? Nor memachta cheshbon. But you're making a calculation, but besides verifying, as we do with witnesses in general, you're making your own cheshbon. You make another calculation, we know. And if the edus stimmt nicht mit dem cheshbon, and if the witnesses does not fit, does not agree with the calculation, is we don't rely on the words of the witnesses. So why is Kiddush HaChodesh different than normal reliance on the Edom? So we can say the explanation in the inner manner of things. In both of these aspects, these two ideas, the witnesses as that saw it, and then they have the calculation, is there is an advantage that the other one doesn't have. And we want to cover all grounds on Kviyas Rosh Chodesh and setting Rosh Chodesh, Zayin Dika Inyan Kloli V'Yisoidi L'Torah Mitzvah. Since it is a general and fundamental matter for Torah mitzvahs, Darf haben bei der Milos, it needs both advantages, as will be said. Und der Fall is ein onu semchim ela shneim ke'echad, and that's why we don't rely but on both of them together. Haraya, Hariya v'hacheshbon. That is both the quote for the Mefarish, that you need both. You need seeing it, the citing of the witnesses, and also the cheshbon, because they have an advantage. And for something like Kiddush HaChodesh, we need. So the Rebbe explains this by introducing bringing that the Torah, the Rashi says the Torah should have started with HaChodesh Hazeh. Why HaChodesh Hazeh, not Anoich Hashem Elikecha? Because HaChodesh Hazeh is the actual general purpose of all the mitzvahs, not the first mitzvah. Anoich Hashem Elikecha is the very first mitzvah. Before that, you can't do mitzvahs because you have to agree that the Eibishter is mitzvah mitzvahs. But HaChodesh gives you the general purpose and the theme, what happens through mitzvah, the elevation, the chiddush. So we'll understand this, that we need both by Kiddush HaChodesh based on the known saying from Pasuk HaChodesh HaZelochem, on the verse HaChodesh HaZelochem. The Torah should have not started but with HaChodesh HaZelochem. Rashi is Masbir, and as Rashi explains right in the beginning of the Chumash, She mitzvah Rishayna shenitztavu bo Yisrael. That was the first, very first mitzvah which the Jews were commanded in it. Is l'chayre need move on, so l'chayre it's not understood. Pavos is hachodesh hazolochem the mitzvah Rishayna shenitztavu bo Yisrael. Why is hachodesh hazolochem the first mitzvah that the Yidden were commanded? L'chayre the erste mitzvah kiddush hachodesh. L'chayre the erste mitzvah gedarf zayin. It would seem the first mitzvah should have been Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I'm God, your God, Kabbalah El Malchus Shemaim, to accept the yoke of the heavenly kingdom. But is the Hascholavi Yisoitun Kiyum Kol HaMitzvahs. That's the beginning and the basis, the foundation of observance of all the mitzvahs, to accept the governments of the Shemaim, to accept Hashem. Is the Bir Bazeh. So the explanation, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, which is the beginning of the Aseres HaDibros, is the Haschol V'Yisoid for all mitzvahs. That's the beginning, and the basis of all mitzvahs, B'negei der Kiyum, HaMitzvahs B'Poil. That's as it relates to the actual observance of the mitzvahs. B'chdei der Mensch soll mekayim sein, mitzvahs kideboy. In order for the person to fulfill the mitzvahs properly, he first has to have the acceptance of the heavenly kingdom. So the first basis for actual observance of mitzvahs has to be Kabbalah Soil. But however, HaChodesh Zelochem is the Matorah V'Tachlis. That's the goal, the purpose from Torah mitzvahs. Und therefore, because that's the goal and purpose, is das Nisbayer und gesagt geworden. That's why it was articulated and it was said Bahagdom as an introduction to Allah mitzvahs, to all mitzvahs, the introduction al mitzvah Rishonah, the first mitzvah. The first mitzvah expresses the goal and the purpose of all mitzvahs. So Anochi Hashem Elokecha is the beginning, the foundation of the mitzvahs. But what is the purpose and the goal? As an introduction, we have the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. Because the idea of Chidush, renewal, the Moila, that's the idea of Torah. The Torah. The Chiddush is that the Yidden have to create, the Eibishter created the world as an entity, and we have to take this entity and create it and make it into, subjugate it to Hashem, to make it to a non-entity. The kavanah from Torah mitzvahs is, the intent of Torah mitzvahs is, as Yidden sollen oifton achidush in der Bria, that the Yidden should accomplish a novelty in creation. Okay, you do a biur hapnimi the minor chazal. As we know, the inner meaning of the saying of our sages of blessed memory, Gedolim, Maise Tzadikim, Yeshem Maise Shumayim V'Oretz. The act of the Tzadikim is greater than the act of the heavens and the earth. But Maise Shumayim V'Oretz is Brio Yesh Me'ayin. The act of Shumayim V'Oretz is creating an entity from nothing, a Yesh from Ayin. That's the Maise B'Shamayim V'Oretz. But Maise Tzadikim is V'Zeitun Oivdem Bitla Yesh Alayim, that they accomplish the subjugation of the Yesh to the Ayin. That's greater. And the fact is Gedolim in Maise Shamayim V'Oretz. So why are they greater? Okay, Min HaShamayim, they make it from nothing, from ex nihilo into an entity, from Yesh, from Ayin, and we make from Ayin liyesh, and we make a yesh ayin. Why is it bigger? Because this would be similar to the saying of our sages. As Godel hoyo neis achron yeser min harishon. That the second miracle was greater than the first miracle. That was with Negeya, that he asked for to become. They gave him Nashamayim, they gave him the leg, and then he prayed That was a reward. He was very poor, and he got a gift. He got the leg of the table, and then later on he regretted it, and it was taken away from him. And the Gemara says that the second miracle to take away what was given is greater than the first one. Why? Because from heaven, they give, but they don't take. The Nes von Umkehr Nazach zu Ayin. So therefore, the miracle to return something to make it Ayin, Mishkel, to take, in order to bring back and to make it into Ayin, is Gereser with the Nes von Miyev Yoiv. That's greater than the miracle to give, as is Over Nazach Ma'ayin Liyesh, that there should be a creation from Ma'ayin Liyesh. So that's bigger, and therefore it's Gedolim, Ma'asid Tzadikim. But what is the Ma'aser Tzadikim? The Ma'aser Tzadikim is a chiddush. It's all about a renewal, a chiddush, to make a chiddush in the world. And this is the remes in a chiddush hazalochem. This is the hint in a chiddush hazalochem. Chiddush is meloshon chiddush. Chiddush means novelty. It comes from the language of novelty. Und der koyach von chiddush, and that power for novelty, for renewal, bringing in this novel, is übergegeben geworden zu Iden Lachem. So given to the Yid. But durch Teure Mitzvahs, through the Teure Mitzvahs, machen sie die Welt for Adirah Yisborach. They make the world for a dwelling, for Him blessed, for Hashem. So basically, a Chodesh Hazeh Lachem has a general concept, the concept of Chidush, the concept of renewal, the concept of taking the yesh and making it into an ayin, and making it into subjugating it to Hashem, making it for a place for Hashem, which is greater than the miracle of yesh me ayin, because it's mishkal. It's like he says, the godliness. This also explains the medrash, that the medrash says on the pasuk in Keheles that toiv mashnaim, two are better than one, and the medrash says mitzvah that was said by Moshe Va'arin, Shnayim is greater than one. But really, Rosh Chodesh is not the only mitzvah that was said by Moshe and Aaron. Why does the Medrash bring this as the place where there's Tovim Hashnayim, when both say it's just the mitzvah of Chodesh? Because this has the level of Chiddush, and we need both Moshe and Aaron. That will explain in Noizvot. The mitzvah, and if understanding the Medrash of Pasuk, with this we can also understand the Medrash on the verse Tovim Hashnayim in Echad, Bikeshem mit Parshas HaChodesh. The pasuk in Keheles that Tovim Hashnayim in Echad, as it relates to the portion of HaChodesh. This is the language of the Medrash. Toiva Parsha shenemra al Pishnayim me Parsha shenemra b'Yachid. It is better a portion that has been said through two, through Moshe and Aaron, me Parsha shenemra b'Yachid, than a parsha that is said only by Moshe. Bishnayim shenemra v'yemer Hashem al Moshe v'Aaron beretz Mitzrayim lemer. So he gives where is the parsha that said Bishnayim. So he brings the pasuk from Chodesh, our parsha. Hashem says al Moshe v'Aaron. Two, Moshe and Aaron beretz Mitzrayim lemer. HaChiddush is al Lochem. The mitzvah Kiddush HaChiddush is nirglat, so it's not so smooth as Anfaran Kama v'Kama parshas in Torah. There are many portions in the Torah by welchen Amidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu is given on Moshe v'Aaron, in which Hashem spoke to both, to Moshe and Aaron. Is Favos bring their Medrash Davke di Parsha. So why does the Medrash bring specifically this portion from the Chodesh Gomer? Why does he bring this portion? Nor the beer in the explanation is because a Chodesh Meloshen Chidush, the fact that novelty, that a Chodesh Hazeh, is the Hakdoma for all of Torah, is Mevayer, the Matorah Klolis from Kol HaTorah Mitzvah. So, this gives the general purpose of all of Torah Mitzvahs. Bald as der Chidush from Torah Mitzvahs is in zwei Nekudas Klolius. Since the novelty of Torah and Mitzvahs is in two general points, was eine is verbunden mit Inyone shel Moshe. One is associated, connected to Moshe. Und eine mit Aaron. One with Aaron, it'll come on, as we'll say, what's level of Moshe and Aaron is in their parsha mudgeshe. So therefore, in this parsha is emphasized the shaykhs to Beda, the connection to both, because in Hachidush, in the purpose and the goal, we'll see the two aspects of Moshe and Aaron. The Far Zog, the Medrash of their Parsha Davke, Toivim Mashnayim and Echad. That's what the Parsha says about this Parsha. The Medrash says only about this Parsha, Toivim Mashnayim and Echad, because this Parsha of Kiddush HaChodesh gives the general Chiddush, which is associated with Moshe and Aaron, specifically in the accomplishment what Torah and mitzvahs has to accomplish. And these two aspects are, as the Rebbe will explain, is the aspect from above, that the above should come down below, and the aspect of the below should accept the above. Moshe is considered Shushvina de Malka. The support for Hashem brings down the Shechina below. Aaron is considered elevating the Bnei Yisrael l'maylo. This is the two accomplishments, and this is the Moshe of Aaron in the Chiddush, the novelty to bring together the two worlds, the upper and the lower world. Zion. Much in Geret Kama Pa'amim, we spoke many times in the Pirush HaLoshen to explain the language. Dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim. When we say to make a dwelling place for him, blessed, in the lower, this really includes two general ideas, points. Aleph, from the perspective of the lower one, as you have to make them fit so that they can serve as a dwelling place for him, blessed, for Hashem. That's from the Tachtonim. And Beis mitzad l'maylo, that we need to for above, you need to make a dwelling place for Hashem blessed. Meint as atzmus yizbarach steht begilu dolamata, mean that his blessed atzmus essence is here revealed below. The Adam lahavdil gefinzach b'dirosah b'chol atzmus, as a person, to distinguish by a person between Hashem, but a person finds himself in his room, his whole essence, his whole being is in the house. The Eibishter should be here fully. These two are a novelty. In order for the lower ones to be fit to become a dwelling place for him, blessed, there has to be the subjugation from the yesh la'ayin. That's the chiddush of taking the yesh and making it an ayin in order to become a dwelling place for the tachtonim. And the same thing is also namshochas atzmus lemata, and to bring atzmus below is an inyan shel chiddush. That's also a novelty. Varum the hisavus ma'ayin liyesh is blois von ha'ora. The creation from ex nihilo into existence, from nothingness into a yesh, that is only ha'ora, it's not atzmus. So we say, bidvar havaya shamayim nasu. It's the word of Hashem, it's a gilui, it's a oir. Und davke durch der avoida von bitla yesh, but specifically through the service of bitla yesh la'ayin, wird oigeton, a chidush. That accomplishes this novelty, the amshochas ha'atzmus lamato, to bring the atzmus below. And das is the oich der tam, and that's also the reason for was the Medrash Oktav, der parsha davke that we say in this parsha, toivim hashnayim min echad, the two are better than one, Moshe and Aaron, because Moshe's is the Sheshina, the Malka brings down, is the novelty of bringing down the Shechina, and Aaron is the elevation, making the place for Dira Lo Yisbarach. While in their parsha, because in this parsha was Gitzach Arois, the Tachlis from Gans Torah Mitzvahs, in which it expresses the goal of all of Torah Mitzvahs, Zaina Mudgesh Beide Nakutis, there's emphasized these 2 points. Sai Moshe Shushvino de Malko. We talk about Moshe, the support of the king, was Tutoif Hamshochas Elokus Milmayl Lamata. He accomplishes drawing down godliness from above to below. Gitem koyach of dem chidush. He gives the power, the sheshvina de malka, for this novelty, when Hamshochas Atzmus do lamata, to bring down Atzmus below. And Sai Aaron sheshvina de matranisa. Also Aaron, the support for the queen, for the Yidden halo milmata lamailo, the elevating from below to above. Was gibt dem Koyach, he gives the Koyach Aaron, gives the Koyach of Mail Shushvina Matronisa of Mail Zain, the Dvorim Tachtenim, to elevate these lower levels. So the Rebbe says these are the two special chidushim of chodesh is chidush of the making Hashem a direlo yisbarach through Torah and mitzvahs by preparing the mata and by drawing down atzmus. And this is Moshe and Aaron. Moshe helps is Shushvina de Malka, brings down the atzmus, and Aaron helps to elevate the mata, the tachtonim. So this is also, as it specifically applies to a yid, these two levels of chidushim. Kishem ches, kishem b'achodesh lachem, gitaris that tachlis from Torah mitzvahs, v'negei zeh pulim vel. Just as the pasuk gives out the goal of Torah mitzvahs, the impact in the world to make a dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim. That's why it comes as an overall introduction before everything as a chodesh, the chiddush. Azoi gitas arois the peula from Torah mitzvahs in Eden. So also the impact that it does by a yid in the world, the elevation, the connection from the tachtonim, dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim, and specifically how Torah mitzvahs impacts a yid. Eden werden zugeglichen zu der Levana. The Yidden are compared to the Levana. We're talking about the Chiddush of Levana. It's the Ma'oir HaKotten, the smaller luminary. To Moshe Kosuv, Meyokum Yaakov Kikottenhu. It says, who will raise Yaakov? Because he's the smaller one. Meaning the relative to the sun, the nations of the world are compared to the sun. The Yidden are compared to the Levana, and they're the smaller one. On Chidush HaLevana v'Gidula, that novel renewal of the Levana and its growth, Vaiser the Chidush v'Aliyah from Eden, that represents this novelty and elevation of Yidden durch Torah mitzvahs mekatnus legadlus. Through Torah mitzvahs, how they grow from small to big. And the Aliyah from Eden tells sich in zwei sugim. How we're elevated, we have two categories. Aleph, the avodah mitzad koiches pnimim shel adam, the service in the inner powers of the person, his intellect, his emotion. Was bechlal is dos the avodah shel peitam v'das. Generally, that's the service that is logical, it's based on reason and knowledge. The ma'ila from the avodah is that inyan hapnimius. The advantage of this avodah is that it's inner. It absorbs. It penetrates. Zinem durch the Metzias Adam. It takes through it. It penetrates the existence of the person. Zayin seichel midas chulu dina de meibishn. His intellect and his emotion are serving Hashem. Beis, you have the avodah mitzad hakoiches hamakifim shalam neshama. The service from the not inner but the surrounding powers of the soul mitzad etzem neshama, and from the essence of the soul. Was direkt sich ois, that expresses himself in the bittul zum Ratzon Elyon, in this subjugation, in effacement to Ratzon, the Ma'ila Metam Badas, above reason. Und das ist euch der Tama Pnimi, and this is also the reason. So you have these two Avedas, the Aveda Mitzad Pnimis, it's like the Hamshocha, and the Avodah Mitzad Bittel, which is the Halah. Und das ist euch der Tam HaPnimi, was Rosh Chodesh wird nikva durch beide Inyanim zusammen. Also the inner reason why Rosh Chodesh needs both Riyah and, as the Rebbe started off, we'll be circling back to the beginning, why we need both Inyanim, Sai Eide Riyah and Sai De Cheshbon, both calculated and also Eide the Chibur from Beida Mailas zusammen, the connection from both of these together, as is dort der Inyan from the Riyah. There is the idea of Riyah was is Hecha from Havana Vasoga, which is beyond understanding and grasp by the Edus. That's through the testimony. It was Gibma Reina Tekev Shil Teire Mitzal Gziris Akosu Canal. they give in the force of Torah because Xeris Hakosov, it's a decree that Bittel Shalamayla Matambadas, which is a subjugation which is beyond the reason. It's the Torah, it's a Edus, und es ist da in das, und es ist da, und das stimmt mit Cheshbon. Also, we have here that it fits with the calculation of Shal Pitam Badas, that it is according to reason and rationale. Der Bittel Shalamayla Mitam Badas, the subjugation which is beyond Tam Badas, is extended into a panimia. So that's why we have the Ederia, the Lamaila Matamadas, and as it comes down into the Bittel in from the Mailmata into the Cheshbon, so we have the combination of both. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Tazria, Parshas Achodesh Tovshin Yuzayin, and Shabbos Parshas Va'era Tovshin Tezvav.